Okay, I think I'm back. I think that something went wrong. The technical stuff is not my forte, but I'm hoping I'm back with you live. I'll repeat some of the stuff I just said. So welcome to this workshop. Today we're talking about breathing. I've divided the workshop into sections because there's quite a lot of information. And today I want to talk about the main breathing muscle in the body, which is our diaphragm. So my first question to you is, why do we breathe? What's important? Why do we breathe? And how does that affect us in not just in, but also out of the saddle? So obviously breathing is essential, it's vital for life. So we could possibly go without food for a few days before, it became dangerous for us. Water we need, we can survive for a few days, but breath, if we don't have our breath, then obviously we don't survive for very long at all. Just a few minutes without breath that's obviously causes problems. So the main muscle that we breathe with is called our diaphragm. And I often find it hard, you wouldn't often see people go, I'm going to the gym, I'm just going to train my diaphragm, I'll be back in half an hour. It's a muscle that we don't see and we can't touch. And so often we don't feel it. It's a muscle that's in the chest. We'll look at it more in detail in a second. But what I want to first talk about is how your breath affects how you feel. So if you're feeling stressed, how does your breathing feel? So if you're busy or anxious or got pressure on you, it could be that you're in a competition environment, it could be that you're nervous, you've seen that big scary dustbin up the road that your horse doesn't like, or you think your horse doesn't like. What happens to your breathing in those situations? How does it feel? So when we're feeling stressed, we tend to breathe much more shallow and much faster. We increase the rate in which we're breathing, and it's very high breathing in the chest. However, if you've just been to a spa and you've had a nice time, if you've a bit of a massage, you've been relaxing with friends and, just chilling out, how does your breathing feel then? Yeah, the breath is deeper, it's slower, and yeah, we feel calmer. And so that's something that I'm sure we're all sort of aware of. And so quite quickly, we can kind of make changes to how we feel by being able to change our breathing. So if you think about how your breathing affects how you feel, if I hold my breath and I start talking, can you notice my body language has changed? So, okay, today we're going to talk about the diaphragm. And, it's really important that we learn about that. Can you see how my body language is different and how that's maybe made you feel? I can breathe now. How that may start to make you feel in, watching that or being in that environment with that. So how I affect you, if I'm feeling stressed, how we affect other people around us. And that's also true for our horses. So if we are busy, stressed, and our breathing is shallow and fast, then our horse is going to pick up on that, and they also will adopt that similar kind of feel, that kind of stressy sense. And so it's something we need to be aware of, because how we feel is going to influence our horses. But also when we calm down and our breathing becomes deeper and slower, it also has that same effect on the horses, so on your horse. So that's just how we tend to sort of observe that. And it's worth noticing that for yourself. So if you're feeling stressed, take some deep breaths, and I'm sure you're going to see a change in how your horse is responding. So let's take a little look at the diaphragm now, because I've only got half an hour and I want to kind of give you some tools that you can use to be able to use your diaphragm better. Now, I'm just going to share my screen just briefly, because I want to show you a picture of the diaphragm. And so you can just see where it's located in your body. And there we go. So the diaphragm is in the rib cage. It's attached to the front of your rib cage, the sternum. And it then is like a dome, as you can see in the picture. It's like a dome shape that comes down, and it attaches to the inside of the rib cage, the lower 3 ribs and the floating ribs. So it kind of domes down. So I think when you're looking at that image, you can see that the shape of it is, you could almost think it looks a bit like a jellyfish, that dome shape. So let's have a look at where it is on you. So we can see that the diaphragm, where it is. Let's have a look. So the sternum, your sternum, this is a sternum. Okay, so at the bottom of the sternum, you've got this pointy bit, subcycle process. If you go up a couple of centimeters from there, that's where your diaphragm, that's how high your diaphragm is in the chest cavity there. Okay, so if I remove that and then just pop your hands, if you create that dome shape that we've just seen to mirror or image the diaphragm, can you see here? That's the top of your diaphragm. So that gives you an idea of where it sits in the body. You can also then feel around your ribs. So if you go down, you can feel your rib cage all the way down. Can you feel right down to those bottom ribs? Inside the rib cage there is where your diaphragm is attached. So you've got this lovely dome shape inside your rib cage. Now, when we breathe, this is the muscle that creates a vacuum in the chest so that our lungs can inflate. So what I'd like you to do is, if you just touch your chest as you're around the diaphragm, the top of the diaphragm, and just start to take some breaths in. And out. And I want you to notice how that, what you're feeling under your hands. So when I inhale, I feel my chest expanding. So my rib cage is lifting. And when I exhale, my chest lowers. As I inhale, it lifts, my ribs lift, and when I exhale, my ribs lower. So that's the movement of my rib cage. Can you try and feel what's happening in your diaphragm? So that dome muscle. So I'll mirror the dome here. So when you breathe in, what do you think is happening to the diaphragm? Well, when we breathe in, the diaphragm lowers and flattens. And when we breathe out, the diaphragm lifts. When we inhale, it lowers. And when we exhale, it lifts. Just see if you can feel, mirror that with me. So hands here. So when you breathe in, the diaphragm lowers. When you breathe out, it lifts. Inhales and exhale. So very often we mistake the movement of our rib cage for the movement of the diaphragm. But as my ribs lift and widen, that's creating space for my lungs to inflate. My diaphragm is moving down. And then when I exhale, my diaphragm lifts, and it's like it's pushing the air out the lungs as it lifts, and the rib cage comes down because it doesn't need as much volume. Okay, so we do that one more time, just mirroring with your hands the shape of your diaphragm. As we inhale, the diaphragm lowers down, drawing the air in into the lungs. And as we exhale, it pushes up. So let me just give you an image that might help you with that. So this is a diaphragm. It's the best I could do. It's not really dome shape, but it's just a cloth over a disc. So it gives you that look of like a jellyfish. And obviously it can't flatten. I haven't got too many hands, so I can't do too much. But these are this is a lung. So this is going to be my right lung. And there's my diaphragm. So when my diaphragm lowers, my lungs expand. And when my diaphragm lifts, my lungs don't. They go back to their resting size. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. So obviously you've got two lungs, one on each side, but also on top of the diaphragm, you have your heart, okay? And it sits between the lungs. There's your diaphragm. So you can also imagine that your diaphragm is lifting and lowering your heart because it's attached fascially to the top of the diaphragm. So when we breathe in, our heart goes down on the elevator. And when we breathe out, our heart lifts. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Pushing the heart up. So the movement of our diaphragm is moving our internal organs. Okay, so if we're shallow breathing, okay, and the diaphragm doesn't go all the way down, all the way up, we're not getting a full intake of air, the heart is not getting that movement. And at the back, just as a sideline, you've got your kidneys as well, and they move up and down. So the heart, so the diaphragm moves up and down as we breathe. And another image that I really like is just thinking of the lungs inflating. So you can either imagine the diaphragm lowering and lifting, that dome shape. I'll get rid of that now because the hands are quite nice. That lowering on the in-breath, the lifting on the out-breath. In-breath and out-breath. You can think of the lungs inflating. But the whole of it, so now this is going to be my whole chest cavity. So as I breathe in, my whole chest expands, my ribs expand. And as I breathe out, my rib cage comes in. I breathe in and my ribs expand. Breathe out. And they come. So we can think of the lungs inflating and deflating. Inflating and deflating. So if we're shallow breathing, we're here. Okay, that's not as efficient as that full breath. So let's just take a look at an image that if you were to close your eyes and you were in a room, or just imagine your lounge at home, and you're inside that room and you can see all of the objects in that room three-dimensionally. Okay, so you can see your coffee table, your sofa, you can see your ornaments and bits and bobs around. And it's a very three-dimensional image in your mind. And that's what I want you to bring into your body. So imagine you're inside your rib cage. And you can see that dome-shaped diaphragm. We've seen an image of it, and we now know how it moves when we're breathing. That may feel very different to you if you breathe, because sometimes we don't really notice how we're breathing, and we can sometimes image that that's the other way around. So now we've got a better understanding of that diaphragm, lifting and lowering. Let's just start to take some breaths in and out. When you breathe in, I want to focus on the out breath for a moment. So breathe in. And as you breathe out, imagine there's a balloon underneath that dome, and it's the helium balloon, and it's lifting that diaphragm up, lifting it up into your chest as you exhale. And then we put a little cushion on the top of the diaphragm where your heart is. And as we inhale, the cushion just pushes the diaphragm down and the diaphragm lowers. The helium balloon lifts and domes on the out breath. The diaphragm is lifting inside the chest. And as we exhale, the cushion just brings the diaphragm down. And the diaphragm flattens as we inhale. And then we exhale, it comes up. The balloon is lifting your diaphragm up. And then on the out breath, there's a cushion that just pushes it down. On the out breath, the balloon lifts and domes the diaphragm, lifting it all the way up into the chest, nice and high. And then the cushion just gently weights that down as we inhale. Diaphragm lifts and domes as we exhale. And flattens as we inhale. So now we have a better idea of the diaphragm, where it is and how it moves with our breaths. So as at the beginning I mentioned, if I get tense, my diaphragm gets stuck. It's tense and there's no movement. So my breathing is held, and when that happens, we become tense. So if I get you to just move your arm for me, I might stand up for this. So I'm just going to circle your arm around, move it around, see how it feels, nice and relaxed arm. Good, moving it around, breathing, everything. Yep, nice. Notice how that feels. And then I want you to clench your fist as much as you can and really tense that arm. Now move the arm. How does that feel? How does your arm, how does that movement feel? Is it satisfying movement? How you can breathe, tension, and then we can go, okay, which one do you prefer? So we're going to shake the arm out, shake out the arm, and then we're going to move the arm again. Okay, so yeah, that feels better with no tension. My arm and my movement is improved. So that's an example of how tension can inhibit movement. And so with tension in the diaphragm, that's inhibiting movement. And we can't underestimate how much the horse feels of our tension. They can feel a fly land on them. So they can definitely feel changes in our tension levels. So when we're thinking about the diaphragm, shake or a muscle, shaking is a really nice technique to use to release tension. Yeah, we shake the arm. You see swimmers at the start of the race, shaking their legs out, getting ready. Yeah, preparation. We've got that proprioception and that release of tension. So how do we get that in the diaphragm? Well, we can shake the diaphragm. So if you've ever been on a bike that you're going down a cobbled street and it jumps around and goes, you get that kind of noise, that's your diaphragm, yeah, reverberating or jumping around. And that's shaking your diaphragm. So that's a technique you can use. If you're particularly nervous or you feel tense, shaking the diaphragm. So you can shake by jumping on the spot, so you can that movement. If you've just joined the session, I'm not mad, just, yeah, you might want to do this in the comfort of your own home. Shake it, shake it around, take the tension out the diaphragm, and there you stand. Notice if that changes how you feel when you breathe. Diaphragm lowering on the in-breath. Ribs are expanding. Out breath. Ribs hug you and the diaphragm lifts. Breathe in. Breathe out. So I can definitely feel much more available, space available to me. Now I've released that tension. It feels quite nice in the diaphragm. Other ways that we can release tension is by tapping. So as we move, breathe deeply. Feel the ribs expanding as you inhale. Tapping around the rib cage, and you can tap on the sternum. This is really good for proprioception and where the ribs are. So we know the diaphragm attaches inside the rib cage on those lower three ribs and onto the sternum. So we just do one side and see how that feels. Oh gosh, I feel much more open in the shoulder, much more relaxed in that side. A few breaths in. Feeling the lungs expand. Imaging the diaphragm, lowering on the in, lifting on the out. Let's do the other side. So you can move when you're tapping. Make sure you're breathing when you're tapping. Sternum. And then a little shake. And see how that feels. The cushion sitting on the diaphragm, just lowering it down, the heart moving down. So you've got lots of images already. So you can think of your heart on an elevator, lifting as the exhale, lowering on the inhale. You can think of a jellyfish, down on the in, up on the out. Just allowing that diaphragm to contract and to stretch. That's what muscles need to get stronger. They need to be able to go through their full range, stretch and contract. If they're fixed in any one position, they become inhibited, and you can't strengthen a muscle if it's tense and it doesn't move. So we now have tension out of the diaphragm. We know where it is. We know it's action. We've released some tension. So let's do a little bit of a stretch for it. So we're going to place the right hand on the left side of your rib cage. Take your right arm. So this is where your diaphragm is attached to. Yeah, we know that. It's on the lower ribs here, on the inside. And the arm comes up, and you're just going to imagine this coming down as I try and reach over. So I'm getting a big stretch in my right side of my diaphragm. And then come up. Make sure you're breathing. Breathing in. Breathing out. There's no right or wrong way to breathe. Okay, you can exhale here. You can inhale. And I want you to imagine at the side of your body, when you bend, that diaphragm is getting a lovely big stretch and a release. And stretches and releases. 2 more, stretch and shortens. The muscle lengthens and shortens. We're going to take it over to its lengthened place. And now breathe. Breathe into your hand. When you inhale, the lungs expand, so the ribs expand. Focusing on that right side. And coming back. And now just see how that feels in your body. How does it compare to the other side? I just feel longer through this side of my body. The shoulder. I feel like my alignment's better this side. We'll do the other side, right hand into the left ribs, arm comes up, and side bend. And I really want you to think about inside of the ribs, again, we're coming in the room, in the ribs, and we can imagine that dome on that left side having a lovely stretch. And then coming back, breathing. And one more time when we're there, we're going to hold it and breathe. One more. And soften. And then coming back to center. Notice how that may change your posture, your alignment. When we have improved alignment, the diaphragm can actually move up and down within that cavity. I'll talk about that on the next set of one of the other workshop parts of this workshop. Today it's just the diaphragm. So lifting and lowering out. Focus on the diaphragm. Lots of images. Now we've done awareness of the diaphragm. We know where it sits in the body. We know the shape of it. We know what its function is. Where else? We also know how to release tension and how tension can affect how how we're breathing, which can affect not only our horses but everything else that we're doing within our movement that becomes restricted. We've stretched the diaphragm and created movement and elasticity. Now, how do I strengthen the diaphragm? How do I get my kettlebell on my diaphragm? How do I strengthen it so that it becomes more efficient at moving up and down, stronger? So in the same way that we would strengthen any muscle of the body, we need to apply some resistance. So what movement does the diaphragm achieve or create? The movement of the rib cage. So when we inhale, the diaphragm is contracting and flattening out, and when we inhale, it comes up. So we can create some resistance by putting a band around the rib cage. So you may not have a band at this point for this, but it's really they're handy things to have if you're looking at kind of continuing with some conditioning providing, because they're so versatile and really great forms of resistance. So we have the band around those lower 3 ribs, and we tighten it quite tight. So I could go around again. How long your band is. These ones are really nice and long, so they give us a lot more versatility. But even just holding your ribs, you could even do that now just by holding your ribs. And when you breathe in, you're pushing against that resistance. So let's have a go of that. Take a breath in We inhale, diaphragm lowers, ribs expand. And then what feels really nice, I always love this, is when we take the band away. And then we breathe. Breathe your natural breath. So, breathing and using the diaphragm, or having an awareness of your diaphragm, and those images, we can take anywhere. We don't need any tools. You can practice your breathing whilst you're walking, and you can practice your breathing on the horse. Okay, so when we are on the horse, we're doing activities. So when you're riding, do you think you need to engage or tense the diaphragm to help stabilize? Probably not the best thing to do, because we need to be able to move in the saddle. And now if you hold your breath, so there's no movement in the diaphragm. See how your movement feels when you're holding your breath. Start to breathe and notice how that feels. So we are going to talk about this. The breathing is kind of leading us into the core, because very often riders brace, they engage their core, and that inhibits movement, but it also causes tension. And as we've just learned, tension in the body makes our breathing shallow and faster. That makes our horses breathing shallow and faster. What happens when our horses aren't breathing very well? Their movement becomes choppy, they become tense. What happens when we feel the horses breathing better? Yeah, they're blowing out their air, they're making those lovely sounds, they soften, and our experience is much more pleasurable. So we can influence how our horses are breathing if we're breathing efficiently and deeply, and being aware of that. So in a moment we can change it. And those images that we've just gone through are some tools that you've now got in your toolbox. So you might like the diaphragm lifting, you might think of the jellyfish lifting, you might think of the balloon lifting up the diaphragm so it domes, and then that soft cushion pushing it down, the heart coming up and down on the elevator. And there are so many more that I can share with you. If you want to do more of the breathing and explore that, through February, this is what I'm doing, is to help you become better at breathing. There's going to be online sessions on Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays. They are going to be just breathing exercises this month. This week, it's all going to be about the diaphragm. We're going to revisit just some breathing exercises with some of that imagery and more. Yeah, so that's where this is going. And the next one, we're going to talk about the transverse abdominis, which is the other breathing muscle in the deep core. So that muscle is, again, very important for breathing, but also for stability of the spine whilst we're riding. We also talk about the pelvic floor, and then we're going to put it all together. Okay, so there's lots of stuff to really build that toolbox for you. I hope you found this session useful. If you've got any questions, please do comment below. Let me know if you want any sort of reconfirming of stuff that I talked about, or you'd like to join the online classes, it's just 15 minutes, you get them on demand as well. And yeah, hopefully you're feeling very calm now, and I'll see you on the next video, which I'll put out next Saturday for the transverse abdominis, the next breathing muscle to discuss. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.